Hello to all you Ethicuties out there and the 40% of you who have not joined the Ethicsverse yet. Welcome to the Ethicsverse, the coolest place to be every Thursday at noon if you are all about making your organization better. We got a phenomenal one for you today. I know I say that every week, but I really mean it this week. So as we're getting started here, please drop where you're dialing in from into the chat. Drop your LinkedIn URL as well. We just got back from SCCE in Chicago. It was a phenomenal conference. I was telling Tomel, our guest today, that this was the first conference I've been to since the pandemic that felt like a pre-pandemic conference. And I was just reminded over and over again how special this community we're all a part of is. You know, I talked to multiple people who were from competitors who developed great relationships and were able to get each of their individual programs further developed by cross-collaborating. So when I say your network is your net worth and neither are big enough, I really mean it. So drop those LinkedIn URLs into the chat and connect with at least one person today. So today's is all about ROI. How do we build the ROI for our program? How do we turn those light bulbs on at the top? If you haven't clicked our link tree yet, there should be a link on the console, or you can hit this QR code here. And this has links for all the stuff to get Ethico a bigger part of your life. You can check out our YouTube channel, which has all the replays. So if you've ever missed a session, you can watch it on YouTube while you're doing the dishes. You can book a demo. You can follow us on LinkedIn. And if you're not following Ethico on LinkedIn, I'd really encourage you to do that, because we take the best clips from every single one of our webinars and from our award-winning podcast, The Ethics Experts. And we post those on there so you can get a little nuggets in your feed of how to get better. So hit that link tree, follow us everywhere, and we will keep it moving here. Today's prize is a book called Reimagine Inclusion by Mita Malik. She was just on the Ethics Experts, I think 2 episodes ago. Phenomenal episode. She has written this book. It's a really important book about inclusion and about really about dispelling some of the inclusion myths that are out there. So super actionable book. I really enjoyed it. Hope you guys like it as well. So 5 of those are going out to Ethicsverse members. If you haven't subscribed to the Ethicsverse, go ahead and do that so you can be eligible for the book. But for those who are most active in the chat, asking the best questions, sharing the best tips, we're giving away 5. Compliance Week is coming up, so do not lose this opportunity. Even if you haven't started planning yet, you can do something on Compliance Week. We did a roundtable about a week ago, and someone shared that, you know, in their first year, it was just a half day. And then the second year, it was a full day. And then the third year, it was a 3-day session. And then by, their 4th or 5th year, they had a full week of activities planned with speakers and so forth. So you're not going to plant an acorn and grow an oak tree overnight. It takes time to get going, but you just have to get going. So if you would like let's drop into the chat, gang, the link for our Compliance Week toolkit. This has something for you to get started with. You can leverage it. You can tweak it. We have all kinds of games and stuff like that that's coming up. So let's go ahead and drop that in the chat. We have a really fun misconduct mystery game, which some of you have seen the video for, which we will be posting on social. The full video we'll be posting on social shortly. But it's a great thing that you can film with your team and send around. People will absolutely watch it, especially if you get some funny wigs. So check that out. I want you to drop a 1 in the chat if you're interested in our custom benchmark report. So we've given out, 5 or 6 dozen of these over the last couple of months, where we take your data, we put it into we benchmark it against our data, against the status quo data, and we give you a bunch of actionable tips for you to improve those metrics. When we can show our value by changing KPIs, which we're going to be talking about today, it's a lot easier for us to make the case and tell the story of the compliance journey that we are on. So drop a 1 in the chat, I think. Yeah, let's drop a 1 in the chat for a custom benchmark report. Somebody from our team will be reaching out to you. And let me tell you about the ecosystem. So you're never going to believe this one. Last week, we did a demo of the ecosystem. We were talking about our new disclosures tool. About 2 hours later, the person that we did the demo with sent me a selfie. They're sweaty in their backyard with a shovel. They're digging in their backyard. And I was like, what are you doing? And he said, well, I'm trying to find some more treasure to get some more licenses. So apparently he thinks he has treasure in his backyard. You don't need to dig for gold in order to, get some licenses for the ecosystem. But if you'd like to see a demo for that, hit the link tree or drop a 2 in the chat and someone will reach out to you on that. I want to talk to you about a couple of other books. We gave out literally like 450 books at the conference this week. We gave out Mary Shirley's book. So if you haven't checked this out, this is phenomenal. 65 hacks and cheat codes to level up your program. You can literally open this up to any page and find something, some kind of a great idea that you can put into practice immediately. So check that out. Tom Fox's book, Speaking Up is Awesome, is quickly becoming one of his best sellers. This is a great book to read to your kids if you're coming in for a career day, to show, to tell the classroom of second or third graders what it is you do, and reinforce this message that speaking up is important at every age. That's a muscle that we want our kids to develop early. Ethics and Compliance for Humans by Adam Balfour. That's another one of the selected books for this year's SCCE. We gave out about 100-something of those. He was speaking, highly reviewed book. Phenomenal book, so check that out as well. Here's the QR code for that. And finally, next week we're going to be talking about hacking ethical innovation. So Mary Shirley is coming on with Lisa Estrada, her mentor and teammate from a previous life. We're going to be going through some ways to really hack your program to drive some more innovation. And then the following week we have Erica Salmon Byrne from Ethisphere. She's the former CEO. I think she's the chairman now at Ethisphere. And we're going to be talking about proxy reporting. This is such a massive tweak you can make to your program by putting a little bit of focus on proxy reporting to get a ton more risk intelligence gathered at scale. So we're going to be talking about that, why it matters, how to activate that level of middle managers to really elevate your program. And with that, round of applause for Tomel. Tomel da Silva Caesar. He is a seasoned international ethics and compliance professional. He has nearly 15 years of experience. He's a native of Chicago. He's a ethics experts alum. He's a ethics fear. What is this thing called? Just kidding. He's an Ethicsverse alum, and he's also the founder of Mayaka. So Tomel, welcome. Tell us a little bit about Mayaka, this organization you founded.
Well, first, listen, thanks so much, Nick, for having us on. This is really a privilege for us to reunite with you once again and have this opportunity to connect and learn from you. MIACA stands for Middle East and Africa Compliance Association. I'm actually dialing in from Riyadh, Saudi Arabia. And we are a not-for-profit organization that's designed to level the international playing field when it comes to compliance. Through partners like you guys, what we seek to do is bring really first-class, first-rate material and skills and capabilities to a region that has been traditionally underserved and often overlooked when it comes to compliance mandates and program integrity programs. Our ultimate goal is to obviously support the people who are in the hot seats in regions and countries where it can be a challenge to do the job. But it's to also, over the long term, change the perspective about the region in terms of the fact that we can, in fact, do good business, good ethical business in a part of the world that has historically had a lot of challenge. So we are just thrilled to partner with you, and thanks so much for doing this. We're really gratified by the occasion.
Well, I'm glad to do it. I'm glad to do anything with you, Tomel. You're someone I've learned a lot from, and you're such a thought leader in the space. And one thing I like about you is that you are somebody who, you see something that needs to get fixed and you fix it. You're kind of you live out that saying of be the change you want to see in the world. So just so glad to be here. So proud of the impact that you're making, and putting some attention on this part of the world that, to your point, has been underserved. So today we're going to be talking about how do we build the ROI for our program. This is going to be you at the end of this session. You're going to feel your hands will be raised in the air in victory, because you're going to feel so empowered on articulating ROI, and your light bulbs are going to be turned on how to, drive that persuasion path forward to get the resources you need. So we're going to talk a little bit about the problem. We're going to do a little bit of a deep dive into KPIs. We're going to talk about a KPI overview. Then we're going to dive into the ROI framework. And then we're going to finish off with some case studies that are going to put these things to work. I have personally done about 3-4 dozen of these over the last year, these custom ROI sessions. So if you're interested in doing one of these, why don't you drop a 3 in the chat and we can reach out. But what I typically do is I get involved with a compliance professional that maybe has budgeting coming up or has a new tool that they're trying to build or that they want to acquire and integrate into their program, but they're having some trouble articulating what the full impact of that is going to be. So we sit down, I get an understanding of their lay of the land, and then we collaborate on a persuasion path, and we start to, quantify the ROI impact for the initiative that they're trying to drive. I have about 1,000% batting average with it, not because I'm so smart, but because the value of our work is so easy to identify. So you probably won't need me after today's session, but if you're interested in doing those, I do those free for clients and for Ethics members in particular. So obviously, throughout the time, we take very seriously the time that you spend with us every week. So if you have questions along the way, of course, you can save those to the end, but go ahead and drop those in. We'll be manning the chat here, finding questions, and we'll be integrating those. So if I'm going too fast or I'm going too slow, or you have something that you want me to dive deeper on, just drop that into the chat and we will address it as we go. So this is probably how you feel right now when you're staring at a spreadsheet or you're thinking about how, you're thinking about your budgeting for the next year. How am I gonna get this done? How am I gonna tell the CFO what it is I need? And so the point is, it's really difficult for us to get budget when we can't show our worth. We know in our hearts that the things we do matters, or the things that we do matter, but sometimes it's hard for the CFO or the executive team, those controlling those purse strings, to really understand that the resources we're asking for are not because we're lazy or because we're not smart business people. It's because we know that these resources are going to help drive our program forward. It's going to help us de-risk the organization, help us paint clear lines on the road of commerce, so the vehicle that is our business can drive down that road faster. But there's often this disconnect, because ethics and compliance pros are not all CPAs. They're not all finance folks. They don't speak ROI every single day. So because ROI is not a daily concept, because some of us hate math, it's sometimes difficult for us to speak the CFO/CEO's language. And we're also fighting in many cases about this branding problem. I was lucky to talk to a few people at SCCE this week where we did a couple hundred interviews where, one in particular, the gentleman said, "Man, my CEO really gets it. I get whatever I need because he knows that if compliance can be part of our entire organization, it's going to lead to all those positive externalities." Well, most people I talk to are not in that situation. Many of us are still stuck in that sort of old school, stereotype. We have that sort of stereotype that we're fighting against of an ethics and compliance department that is a gotta have it, kind of a cost center and so forth. So I'll just give you a quick example. We had a chief compliance officer from one of the world's most ethical companies that I mistakenly thought, man, if somebody is on that list, they must have all the budget they need to do whatever they want to do. Well, they came to me in this same situation. This was, when we first started doing these ROI sessions, that in this experience really kind of motivated us to keep pushing this message out. Anyways, long story short, their company was in a hiring freeze and a budget freeze, but they wanted 2 new heads for their team and like a couple of new tools. So we met for about 90 minutes, and 2 months later, this individual called me back and told me that they got everything they need. They got both of the tools and those 2 heads from us being able to articulate in a more compelling way the ROI impact for what they were asking for. So the stuff that I'm talking about today, these tactics, they absolutely work. And it's critical that we get good at it.
One thing I wanted to say as well, Nick, is even if your folks are not under a budget constraint, it's just incredible how you offer the language that management itself is speaking. So that's also the fantastic perspective that we're really all looking for.
Yeah, that's a phenomenal point. There's always kind of multiple layers to the communication, right? So we're going to be saying some words to these folks to try to get them to do something. We're going to be having some kind of a conversation. But to Tomel's point, if we can better speak their language, we start to shift ourselves from this, back office thing, this sort of check the box department, this bumper sticker on the car, to a partner in the business because we're speaking the language of the business. So that is a phenomenal point. And the more of this kind of stuff you can integrate into your lexicon, the better you are at positioning yourself as that business person who quote unquote gets it. Thanks for that, Tomel. Absolutely. So a KPI overview. We're going to talk about KPIs because many times we want to be able to tie what we're doing down to KPIs. So KPI stands for key performance indicators. Kara just asked, how do we get the points awarded and how do we use them? Oh, I last count, but she got a zillion last week. Yeah, you're going to want to keep stacking those, Kara. So I'm going to keep giving out points. It'll become it'll become absolutely apparent on where you can spend those points, but keep stacking them up. You did get a zillion last week. That was phenomenal. Okay, KPIs are key performance indicators. These are measures of performance and progress, right? These are usually tied to business goals, and they're a set of actionable benchmarks. These are things that we can affect with our efforts. What they're not are vague data points. They should not be overwhelming. They should not be disconnected from business priorities, and they shouldn't be too complex. Think about a KPI as something that you can affect and that somebody who's not even in the nuanced department that you're in can look at and very quickly understand what matters. So we're kind of going bottom to top. If we're going to build out a deeper understanding of KPIs, start thinking about the KPIs that are top of mind for our organization, and then how can we tie, or for our department, and how can we tie those departmental KPIs to the broader goals and objectives of the broader business of the organization and so forth. So they are a lot more than a number. Many times we think like, okay, there's qualitative data and quantitative data, and we don't recognize that bringing both of these together, the sweet and the sour, or the sweet and the salty, bringing those together is what can create a better dish, what can create a better story. So KPIs are a message and a story tool that shows you're moving toward your goal. So what you want to do is keep these KPIs high level enough and make management targets, make quantifiable progress toward these management targets. So it's not just something to get better at. It's not just let's just get better. Let's get better by some quantifiable degree. I don't want to just lose weight. I want to lose 5 pounds in the next month, right? Whatever that sort of goal is, if we can put a time bound on it, make them time bound and specific, that's going to be a lot better. But also don't fall into the trap of like information overload. If you have 50 KPIs, you're not going to be able to really move forward in a meaningful way. Think about the Pareto principle, which I talk about all the time. It is a universal law, and this is the 80-20 rule. So there's probably a few KPIs that are really going to move the needle forward for your organization. And if you can focus on a few things and actually make meaningful progress on those things, assuming those few things are the leverage points or those focal points that are going to, produce those better outcomes, you're going to be able to, avoid wasting time focusing on things that aren't going to move the needle. And you're also going to avoid overloading yourself and the people on your team on focusing on too much. So here are some great KPI qualities. The first one is to keep them simple. I kind of alluded to this before, but simple KPIs avoid confusing people and focusing efforts naturally. Simple KPIs are the key. If somebody has to do 1,000 permutations or do a massive calculation to come down to what's actually going to affect that KPI, then that KPI is likely too complex. So don't overcomplicate your KPIs. You want to make it very easy to be able to explain to somebody on a note card or in a 20-second conversation what goes into this KPI and what efforts are necessary to successfully move that KPI forward. So KPIs can be quantitative, so they can be numerical data that you can track. So maybe it's something like, our benchmark report that comes out every single year is full of high-level KPIs about an investigation program. What's your abandonment rate? What is the proportion of callers that are remaining anonymous versus those that are becoming, or those that are identified? What's your case closure time? What's our aging of cases, right? What's our substantiation rate? These are all high-level quantitative KPIs that we can look at a register of reports and we can aggregate and do some analysis on to quantify. Your supplier NPS rating, right? That's your net promoter score. Your internal NPS rating. Would you recommend, our company to a friend? How likely are you to make that recommendation? These are all quantitative KPIs that we can measure and we can track for improvement. But also, let's not lose sight of qualitative KPIs. Those are valid. Don't be scared by qualitative data because there's a lot of value in that data as well. So when we're aggregating data from different data sources, again, I know we're kind of ground level right now, and we're gonna pull all this stuff together as we kind of move up into the ROI discussion and how we actually quantify that stuff. But be thinking about that end goal as we're thinking about our KPI apparatus, because the end goal is persuasion. The end goal is influence, and that influence is going to be done through story. It's not going to be done just through a bunch of logic. So if we need to be able to tell a story, we likely are going to have to pull quantitative data along with qualitative data. So along with that net promoter score, for example, that internal net promoter score, how likely are you to have a friend come and join the organization, you can also have a text box. This could be on your culture survey or whatever, where you can start to aggregate little quips, quotes, and little stories that when put together can make a much more compelling case. Storytelling is what drives persuasion much more than data points. So set yourself up for success by gathering qualitative anecdotes, quotes, and things like that for the particular persuasion path that you're trying to build. So again, this is obviously a lot about, we can get a lot of this great information from practitioners, people on our teams or employees through feedback forms or surveys to, again, bolster our argument. Our KPIs, they have to be relevant, right? We have to match the appropriate employee and department, and we should tie to the efforts that are needed to drive them forward, right? So again, if one KPI we're measuring perhaps is case closure time, well, that obviously should tie down to the investigations team or the employee relations team that's handling all of those investigations. Somebody who's doing something ancillary, doing just risk assessments, for example, them being responsible for KPIs. If it's not relevant, that obviously doesn't make sense. So the more specific you can build your KPIs, all of this stuff is kind of like a fractal. So we can have a department level KPI and then individual KPIs that kind of tie into that. But as you build that KPI apparatus, I think the point is to make sure that those KPIs are relevant for folks and that they tie to the effort needed to move that KPI forward, and assuming that KPI moving forward is going to make that goal, achievable. They should be directional. So this is something that I think is really important. If you can have a negative bias on your KPIs, that's going to be always better. So a negative bias means let's talk about some kind of a quality KPI. So a positive bias would be saying like, I want to try to get this number as close to 100 as possible. So you maybe have a 93% quality level and you're trying to get that to 95. Okay. Psychologically, that's not nearly as powerful as having that same thing as a negative bias. So instead of saying I'm trying to get from 93 to 95 positive bias, let's have a negative bias and say we're at a 7% error rate and I'm trying to drive that down to a 5% error rate. It's still a change of 2%, but proportionately, it's a much bigger change to change, 7 down, a move of 7% down to 5% proportionately is a much bigger move than something from 93% to 95%. And, most of us did not get straight 100% in school. I'm sure I didn't as well. And so a 93 was kind of a good number, right? Like if I got a 93 on a class, I got a 93 in a test, that's fine. But if we're trying to get 100%, quality level, flipping that upside down can be, flipping that to that negative bias can be extremely powerful. So, how you can put that into practice, again, just using like aged cases right now, we want our proportion of cases aged over 30 days to go from, whatever it is, 20%, we want to get that down to 10%, okay? Have that negative bias and focus efforts repeatedly. Measure, you can manage what you're measuring and what you're managing, you're going to get done. Focus repeatedly each week, each day on driving those things down, and you're going to be able to see some real movement on the KPIs. Again, we're going to bring this together because movement on our KPIs are going to be the building blocks for the persuasion path that we are going to build with our ROI discussion. Oops, I did a double click there. So we want these to be specific. I kind of alluded to this before, but we want to be able to apply SMART goals to our KPIs. So SMART goals are specific, measurable, attainable, relevant, and time-bound. So if you're not putting a SMART goal over a KPI, either there's a problem with your KPI because it can't be SMART goalified, or you're not putting, you're not being smart. Okay, you're not putting all the SMART components into managing that KPI. So again, the more specific we can be, the more likely those are going to be those are more likely to be achieved. Again, think about if you're trying to get healthy, you saying, I just want to get healthy over the next 6 months is not going to be as powerful than if you say, I want to be able to run a mile in 10 minutes, or I want to be able to lose X amount of pounds, or whatever that is. The more specific they can be, the more likely you are to achieve them, because there's going to be more specific effort required to move the needle on those KPIs. So here are a bunch of example KPIs. I'm sure you have 100 others in your organization that you could fill out a slide like this. But what's your cost per incident? How many training sessions did we have? What's our completion rate on training? What's our turnover rate or cost per employee that we end up losing? What's our substantiation rate on on our investigations? What's our litigation expense? What's our code of conduct violations? What's the count of those? Okay, so those are just a bunch of examples. So those are department level examples. Most organizations are going to have sort of company level KPIs as well, and these are the things that the CEO is concerned about every day. These are the things that the CEO is reporting to the board every single day. Of course, there's multiple layers of this stuff, but these core things are what quote management, quote unquote, really cares most about. So they're concerned about what's revenue growth? How fast are we growing? What's our revenue per client? How many clients do we have? Are we growing that? What's our profit margin or our EBITDA? You know what? If you drop EBITDA or EBITDA into a conversation, someone's gonna say, "Oh, okay, this person knows what they're talking about." EBITDA is simply earnings before interest, taxes, depreciation, and amortization. It's just a financial term that is a proxy for cash flow of an organization. So the revenue on the P&L statement, that's not usually that close to cash flow, whereas EBITDA is really kind of a better proxy for that. So an organization is usually trying to maximize its EBITDA. So I can spend a whole hour on that, but I will spare you. But EBITDA or EBITDA, profit margin, they care about. Our client retention rate. Are we churning clients? Are we growing our client base, or are we losing clients too fast? Customer satisfaction. That's why everybody's always talking about net promoter score. You're never going to have a great company if people don't love to do business with your organization. So
Nick,
I've
seen a few of these that are excellent. We have a question. Will folks get the slides after this, because there's some great ones in there.
Yeah, but only if they ask nicely. No, of course you'll get them whether you ask or not. We'll send them around after. So we talked a lot about our department level KPIs, and then we also talked about our company level KPIs. So our job is to tie what we're doing at our department level, these first order KPIs, to those company level KPIs. So the more readily we can make that connection between what we're doing and what the organization cares about, what the board cares about, the easier it is for them to understand the connection between our efforts and their efforts and how what we're doing fits into the broader picture. So this is the easiest path to becoming a profit center. If we can tie what we're doing to the profit, to these KPIs, the EBITDA expansion, the revenue growth, the client retention rate or the employee retention rate, the more we can tie what we're doing to those things that they care about, all of which affect that bottom line, that EBITDA line or that profitability line, the easier it is for folks to see, like, oh, wow, I've been looking at this entire department wrong. Wow, this department has a much bigger impact than I ever thought of before. Wow, we should really, brush a couple of crumbs off the table for these folks to go ahead and do what they need to do, because they have such a massive ROI potential. That's the battleground that we are addressing today. So let's talk about the ROI framework.
We've got some questions here. We've got a few questions here, Nick, on KPI, maybe before we go on to the next section.
Yeah, great.
So we have one from Kara. It says, can you talk any more about negative KPIs?
Yeah, sure. So I'm just saying that any KPI you have, you can have a positive bias toward it or a negative bias toward it. And I'm saying a negative bias is going to be a much more powerful mover, because we're going to be eliminating things instead of trying to build something up. So, I used that quality example. I think I talked about case closure time. I'm just trying to jump to, okay, here, how about training rates? So training completion rates. You can say, we're trying to get 100% completion on our training, or we want 100% participation on our training. Well, the other way to look at it would be to say, I want to minimize the non-participation rate. So, if my current, training completion rates are 97% and you're trying to get that to 99%, I would say we have a 3% non-participation rate on our trainings, and I'm trying to eliminate that or get that as close to zero as possible. And then when you're looking at it just focuses you more on what you're actually trying to affect. You're trying to eliminate the negative elements from the system. You're trying to eliminate non-participation. That's really what you're focused on. But sometimes if we have that positive bias, we get this sort of psychological false sense of security that we're doing better than we actually are, because 97% is pretty good, but that's still 3%. that aren't doing the training. I hope that helped. If it doesn't, Kara, you can ask again, but that's going to cost you a couple of points. Okay, you got a zillion, but I'm just letting you know. Okay, any other questions there, Tomel?
Yeah, I think we have one from Jack. Hello?
Yeah.
Yep. He says, is a KPI about penalties, fines imposed a good one? After all, it is not the CCO responsible for these penalties as they have done their job by rolling out policies, monitoring, etc. It is the business heads who should be measuring against such KPIs.
So that's actually a great question. I look at that a little bit different. So I just kind of think you got to use whatever you got to get what you want to get. So if you have, even if it's something that's outside of your control, but you have a second or third like level impact on it, it's up to you to incorporate that into your persuasion path. And you can craft whatever story makes the most sense to get what you need. So if there's a tool that you would like to get that, you know, one of the benefits of which would be helping to address fines and penalties, even though those are technically on, you know, those business leaders to make sure that those things don't happen. Well, then you should be able, you know, I would definitely be incorporating that and say, look at the fines and penalties that we had last year because our middle managers weren't engaged. This tool that I'm looking for is going to help drive that engagement forward so that we can minimize that. Even though I've done what I'm supposed to do, putting out the right policies and procedures, roll those out to the right folks, we still have a gap in our system. Our competitors are using things like this. Our gap in the system is contributing to this. So think about your KPIs. I mean, there's kind of a dual purpose nature for your KPIs if you really want to think about it strategically. One is like, how can I improve? What should I be looking at to improve? And then the other is, what can I utilize and what can I monitor to tell the story I need to tell to get what I want? This is a game of influence, man. Like it's a much bigger game of influence than I think we think. And as we get into this ROI framework, I think this is going to become a little bit more apparent. But like we typically in the ethics and compliance field in particular, we have a bias to like not talk about those second and third order impacts because they're so fuzzy and they're hard to say with certainty. Well, we can use a thing called a sensitivity analysis, which we're going to get to later, to allow us to incorporate that in a compelling way, in a conservative way that allows us to still get some of those benefits. But I think if we stay sort of too black and white about like what only talking about the things that we actually touch, well, then we leave a lot of influence on the table because let's face it, the ethics and compliance department of an organization is like the circulatory system. And the ones that are functioning really well, that are, you know, part of the world's most ethical companies that are consistently outperforming their everyone else, they are getting those benefits of higher employee engagement, lower employee turnover, less fines, more found revenue, all of those positive, you know, second and third order externalities that come from a highly functioning system. They're getting those. So if we can incorporate some of that stuff into how we're talking about ourselves during that budget discussion or how we're talking about ourselves to the CFO, it helps to give us a little bit of credit for that much broader impact that we're actually having in the organization. So please let me know if that didn't answer the question, and I will just ramble on for another 2 or 3 minutes, okay? All right, ROI framework. So ROI, you know, it seems like this math problem. It seems like this complex thing. We have to just really think about this. Let's reframe what ROI is. This is merely a tool for persuasion. This is just a way to denominate different things, different investments into a single comparable denomination, okay? So obviously it's return on investment. Return is in the numerator, investment is in the denominator. So it just tries to directly measure a particular investment's return relative to its cost, okay? But remember, this is just a tool for persuasion. And when we can think about ROI in the context of persuasion, as opposed to thinking about it as some algebraic math problem, it now opens up an entire new world of things that we want to start incorporating and getting smart at. You know, I was reminded of this at this conference we just went to, that this game is not about knowing policies and privacy and DOJ guidance. We obviously have to know that. This game is a game of influence. This is a game of, you know, behavioral science. How do we influence people's behavior and get them to see things and act in ways that we want them to? And ROI is no different. This is all about persuasion. And so if we start to think about persuasion, we need to think about what motivates people to buy things. So if you look around your house or you look down at the clothes you're wearing, or you think about your car, all of these purchases that you have made have been for one of these three reasons. This is called the motivation triad. So one is to avoid pain, one is to conserve energy, right? More efficiency. And the third is to seek pleasure. This is kicking more ass or, doing more, right? So we buy things to, and it's usually a combination, right? But we do things to avoid pain, to conserve energy or gain efficiency or to gain pleasure. It's pretty interesting how this maps so cleanly to Aristotle's rhetorical triangle. So if you get nothing else from this conversation, I want you to recognize that logic makes you think, but emotion makes you act. If we're not bringing, most of the people that I've talked to during these ROI coaching sessions or whatever you want to call them, when we talk about how they're going to approach it, before we kind of dive in and start to really quantify the ROI, what they're really focused on is the logos. They're focused on these logical, intellectual appeals. Look, we need some of that. But what's usually devoid from these conversations is the pathos, these emotional appeals. Logic makes you think, emotion makes you act. I got engaged, if you can imagine, and I got married without a PowerPoint presentation. Okay, there was a lot of romance in that gondola we were in, and there was no logic involved. Okay, there was no PowerPoint presentations, and I'm still married. Okay, so my point is, many of us on this call, we nerd out on this stuff. I look forward to the Ethics Verse every single week. I look forward to these conferences every single week. I want to learn more. I want to get more knowledge. I want to see how other folks are doing things so I can share that and we can really optimize our program and build organizations that are truly based on integrity. We sell ourselves so short when we don't bring that energy and that excitement to these kinds of conversations. Like there's multiple layers of our communication. When we're super excited about something, and we can convey that excitement, of course we need that logic. That logic is going to take care of itself because all of us are very logical by nature. But if we can incorporate some of this excitement that we have for it, it does a lot to move the ball forward. So persuasion is an effective transfer of emotion. That's what it is. And so logic makes you think, emotion makes you act. I'm going to be saying this as long as you know me. Bring that excitement to the conversation. Bring your passion for this function. Bring your passion for this project that you want these couple of extra bucks from the organization. Bring that passion to the discussion and you watch how things start to unlock, because you're going to be able to create a much more compelling case when you bring a little bit of emotion and a little bit of positive pathos to augment the logos or the logical appeals that you've been making. And also, let's think back to this thing. When we're talking about why people do things and we're talking about, we're talking to the CFO, that's what I'm going to keep kind of using for the rest of this conversation. Like we're talking to the CFO, where are we focused here? We're usually focused on avoiding pain. We're maybe focused on conserving energy. We're very rarely focused on seeking pleasure. But if you go back in the slide deck to the company levels KPIs, EBITDA expansion, client retention, client growth, right? Cash flow improving. Those are all pleasure seeking, initiatives. So again, if we can incorporate more points on this motivation triad into our talk, and we can incorporate, we can augment our logical appeals with these emotional appeals and ethical appeals, we're going to be a lot more powerful. And especially when we're selling to a committee, the odds of us resonating with more people is going to be exponentially higher. Okay. So I also want you to think about this. Many times, I've done like several dozen of these at this point, and at the start of the conversation, where the people that I'm coaching are usually like a little bit sheepish about what they're asking for. Maybe it's a 10% or 15% above the budget they've already been allocated, and they're thinking, "Man, this is a big number. This is kind of a lot." And I just want you to understand that it's only a big number if you think it's a big number, regardless of the size of organization. Like if you're on this call, you're working in an organization where probably whatever you need is going to be a drop in the bucket for the organization. So I'm just trying to show this. This is using some Gartner estimates for annual ethics and compliance budgets. And then we're denoting these down relative to like what somebody, to the like applicable cost for somebody who's making 100K. Okay, so the point is, the equivalent spend at $100,000 for the average ethics and compliance budget is $81, right? So if you're making, 100K, it's equivalent to $81. So it's the equivalent of going out, the entire budget is the equivalent of going out for like appetizers and drinks one time. The point is, it's not a needle mover. But if you're going to this conversation very sheepishly and without a lot of confidence and thinking that like it's a big number, that energy transfer, that emotional transfer is going to be picked up on by that CFO, and the odds of you getting what you want are at least diminished. So if you think what you're asking for is a big number, they're going to think it's a big number. back to our total enterprise value. Okay, so what most public organizations, most for-profit organizations are focused on is enterprise value. They're focused on increasing their enterprise value. So again, look, we're trying to tie what we're doing to what the board, the CFO, the executives care about. This is what they care about. All those company level KPIs all feed into this thing. So how do you increase enterprise value? You do it by increasing revenue. You do it by reducing expenses. You do it, which you can do it by increasing EBITDA or higher cash flow, higher profitability for the company, or by increasing the multiple. So what this means, think about EBITDA times a multiple. This is the equivalent as like a cost per square foot for a house. So there could be two houses right next door to each other. One is updated with all the new finishes, new floors, new fixtures. This one still has the avocado appliances and shag carpeting. Even with the same floor plan, this one is going to trade at a much higher cost per square foot than this one, right? Everybody gets that. Well, organizations are the same way. And organizations that have a highly developed ethics and compliance program, organizations that are de-risked, organizations that are growing fast, that have higher client retention, all of these kinds of factors lead into a higher multiple, a higher cost per square foot. So if nothing else, and there's a ton of private equity firms out there like WAD Capital, for example, or like the fund that my brother you used to work for, that have the light bulb turned on, that they say, cool, I'm going to buy a profitable undermanaged business and I'm going to professionalize that business. So WAD Capital, for example, they have a whole team of folks that go and they help optimize the compliance programs of the companies that they buy, because WAD Capital increases its price per square foot of the companies that they own by professionalizing those businesses more, in addition to rebranding them or marketing them better or growing them better and stuff like that. But I'm just saying the efforts that you are doing are going to feed into this multiple expansion for your enterprise, which obviously leads to more enterprise value. So just if you're looking for points on this enterprise value equation that you touch, it's definitely expense reduction. In some cases, it's revenue improvement, depending on what you're actually touching. It's definitely EBITDA improvement. We're going to show that in a minute. And it's absolutely multiple expansion. So if just like if you think it's a big number, they're going to think it's a big number. If you think you're a cost center, they're going to think you're a cost center. When you can drop the scales from your eyes and realize that, wow, all this stuff I'm doing, yes, it's great. Yes, it's nice. Yes, we're building a better culture. Yes, we're de-risking the organization. And oh, look, by the way, I'm touching all these different points in this enterprise value equation. You should have a lot more confidence for getting what you need. But no one's going to just give you what you need. Okay, you have to go out and get it, and that's what we're going to be talking about today. This compliance.
Got a question just on the ROI point. So K. Parl says, "Hi Nick, I'm struggling to think of examples related to ROI. As in compliance, we are focusing on risk avoidance and avoiding regulatory fines or dropping customers due to reputational risk event. Can you give us a few examples, please?"
I would tell you to stay tuned because we're about to dive deep into all of those. I will tell you, just to keep you listening for the next 20 minutes here, I've never done one of these ROI coaching sessions that haven't been phenomenal. I've never done one where I've said, well, there's nothing here. Like there's always something there. We can always find it. The title of this, I'll just give you a preview, I guess, spoiler alert, but I better not see anybody leave. I'm just kidding. Today, employees care about a culture of integrity well beyond what our grandfathers cared about, okay? That's absolutely true. So a culture of integrity actually matters for folks. And research has shown that over 50% of the departures during the Great Resignation were on a primary or secondary basis driven by values things. So if we can affect and help drive a culture of integrity in our organizations, and the employees who are arguably our most important stakeholders, because of the fact that no external stakeholder is going to love your organization unless it's full of internal stakeholders who actually love it, and turnover has a significant cost. Well, then if we can tie a reduction in turnover, tie that to the better culture that we're helping to drive, well, we can quantify what that cost of turnover is, and we can do an easy sensitivity analysis to show that 50 basis point change in this, 1% change in this, 1% change in our employee engagement, all of which falls to the bottom line, by the way, those are all components of our of the return that we absolutely need to be taking credit for, because I can guarantee you every other department in your organization has gotten good at this. You think marketing's not taking credit for stuff? Of course they are. Everybody has learned to take credit for these second and third order impacts of what they're doing, brand awareness, whatever. There's 1,000 examples in the marketing department alone. We need to take a page out of that playbook and incorporate more into our return to augment, to expand and gain and get credit for the impact that we're actually having. So I hope that wasn't too rambly, but I'm on a roll today. So, you got to take what you can get. Compliance 3.0 framework. This is a really helpful framework just to assess where you are, where our industry is, maybe where a particular project within your program is. But it's also a great framework to help guide us through our ROI construction. Okay, so 1.0 is really all about penalty avoidance. This is when ethics and compliance first came out. It was all about risk avoidance, penalty avoidance. This is when ethics and compliance department was a necessary evil. 2.0 is where most of us find ourselves now. Here we're really focused on efficiency. We have tools, we have dashboards. We're supposedly gaining all these insights. Many of us are, while we're drowning in a data lake, we still find ourselves, scarlet letter of the cost center stereotypes still attached to us, okay? We're often siloed, we're often reactionary. Where we're all trying to go is this effectiveness thing, right? We want to be partners to the business. We want to be proactive. We want to be brought in sooner rather than later. We want to be these trusted advisors and revenue protectors for our organization. So 1.0 is about risk reduction, 2.0 is about efficiency, 3.0 is about effectiveness and expansion. And if you think about this maps also beautifully to the motivation triad, right? 1.0 is about pain avoidance, i.e. risk avoidance, penalty reduction. 2.0 is about efficiency, right? Doing more with less. And 3.0 is about seeking pleasure. That sort of, that like effective impact, profitability, expansion, and so forth. So that's the preview for this slide. So when we're constructing our ROI, it's helpful to think about three different, components in our numerator. What's our 1.0 return? What examples or how can we quantify the risk in penalties, the risk in fines, the odds for us, getting under a DPA, the reduction that might come from fewer EEOC claims, right? What are some of the penalties that what's some of the risk avoidance that we can quantify, again, conservatively, because we want to be compelling with our argument. What are some of those things that can go into that first bucket? What's nice about this framework is it just kind of turns into a Mad Libs exercise. So then we're looking at 2.0. What efficiency gains are we going to get? If, in some of our case studies, we're going to be talking about different tools. These tools are generating different, efficiencies. How can we conservatively quantify those efficiencies and take credit for those things? And finally, the 3.0 return, this is really strategic measures. So this is going to be stuff like reduced turnover, higher employee engagement, found revenue, lower churn. These are all things that we can have an impact on with the work that we're doing that we want to quantify in a conservative way and incorporate that and then divide by our fully loaded cost. Now, I want to make a note on fully loaded cost. Again, looking at our ROI as a persuasion tool, and recognizing that our adversary in this, that's just kind of shorthand for the person that we're trying to convince. Our adversary is a skeptical, bean counter CFO. I can say that because I'm a CPA, but we're talking to a bean counter who is looking for, a full picture of this thing. We want to be extremely conservative at every turn. So a fully loaded cost means I'm trying to remove objections that my adversary is going to have in the context of my ROI discussion. So I'm going to fully load up my denominator. So I'm going to load it up with my implementation costs. I'm going to load it up for the proportion of the time that people on my team are going to be spending implementing that thing. I'm going to be loading it up with all the costs that I can, because I don't want to do this whole presentation and then say, you know what, this whole presentation stinks. They didn't even include implementation costs. Someone's going to have to put this thing in place. What about those costs? The more of those things we can head off at the pass, A, the more compelling the case is going to be, B, the more thoughtful that is going to seem, and C, back to Tomel's point from before, the more we are going to appear as somebody who quote unquote gets it, right? The better we can speak people's language, the more respect they have. We were in Uber, and my friend Tyler, his wife is Nigerian. He starts speaking Nigerian or to the driver. you should have seen how this guy was driving. He saved us 20 minutes in traffic on the Kennedy in Chicago. I'm saying he was breaking mad laws, but it was just because Tyler spoke his language. So there's a lot of power in speaking people's language. Okay, so we have about 15 minutes left. We're doing great on time. We're going to dive right into these case studies. Any other questions pop up along the way, Tomel?
No, I think we're good for now.
Good. Okay, so our first case study is all about case management. Okay, so here's our fact pattern. We currently are spending $25K on a tool. We want to get a new tool that's $30,000. So it's a little bit of an enhanced tool. It has some better integration, some better things. Okay, so it's new tool is $30K. Our current case closure time is 45 days. Okay, it's taking us on average about 45 days to close our cases. And the new tool estimates that case closure time is going to be cut in half due to workflows, due to automation, due to auto triage, due to things like that. Okay, better information, all that. We currently have a 4-person team with average comp of $70K. Okay, so there's 4 people on our team who are spending all of their time working on investigations, dealing with the stuff that's coming through this tool that we're trying to upgrade. Okay, so that team's cost, again, remember, I'm talking about fully loaded cost here. That team's cost is $280,000. Our incremental investment, right? We're paying 25. We're going to be paying 30. So our incremental investment is $5,000. And we're going to have assumed automation savings of 51%, right? So we're going to be able to cut that time in half, and we're going to be able to, so 23 days down to 45 days, we're going to be able to cut the work time in half. That's the assumption we're going to make. So our return is 51% of this total cost, so that's $144,000. Our investment is $5,000. So what's our ROI? This is a very simple example, but we're, when we go through, when I do one of these coaching sessions, we're constructing 5 or 6 of these to put them all together to craft the full case. But I'm just trying to give it to you in bite-sized pieces so that you don't get overwhelmed and you can see this concept in action, okay? So the ROI for this is going to be 29 times. To put this in perspective, a 3x ROI is a great ROI. So anything above 3x, you should be able to walk in confidently and say, this is an absolute no-brainer. The average private equity fund is looking to give 2 to 3 times their investors' money back over a 5 to 7 year period. So you doing a 3x ROI in any given year or any couple of years, you should be able to walk in with confidence. But what you're going to see, because the ROI has not been squeezed out of our departments yet, because ethics and compliance is so new, and because we haven't done a good job of bringing that ROI, of articulating and quantifying that ROI in our persuasion path, there's always multiple examples of really high ROIs for what we're talking about. So 29x here. And the way that I've seen, or the way that I've helped a couple of people talk about this, because this kind of one comes up a lot, especially when there's a significant drop in the level of work, so we did one 2 weeks ago, and this compliance officer I was talking to, she had been asking for another person or another 2 people or something for, the last several months. They didn't have budget for it. So now she could go and she could say, look, I just freed up 2 heads on my team. So remember those 2 people I've been hounding you about for the last 6 months? We don't have to worry about that anymore. I can repurpose these people, and now I have an implicit expansion of my team and expansion of my horsepower. But that only works if you're, laying that groundwork and ABCing, always be closing, right? If you're talking about what you need all the time, and you're crafting and you're signaling to your boss or to whoever controls the purse strings, whether it's the audit committee or the board, of where you want your program to go, you can get them ready for those asks that are coming down the road, and you can set yourself up for success when a new opportunity comes up to say, hey, that thing I've been asking for, I'm not even going to need that anymore if we do that. Boom. So you get that. Okay. And what I'll tell you is that on this one, this is obviously just on efficiency gains. So this is all a 2.0 return. So looking at efficiency gains, which you can always find, you can always make a good argument, a good conservative argument for, that's a great way to start filling out those gains on the efficiency piece of the return component, okay? So let's talk about an employee retaliation campaign. For some reason, these are not coming up. Let me see. Oh, here we go. Nope. Hold on. Bear with me here. Do not judge me, please. No judgments. Okay. All right. So here's our fact pattern. There's the answer on the side. So anyways, here is our fact pattern. We think there might be a retaliation problem in our organization. Okay. What are we going to do about it? Well, we're currently not spending anything on retaliation, but we've seen the ECI report that said that 79% of people who speak up feel like they're retaliated against. We know that retaliation is a big headwind for the level of reporting in our organization, and we want to go ahead and address that. But we're not spending a dime on it right now. So our current cost is zero. We want to do a bunch of, we want to do an awareness campaign, and we want to do exit and stay interviews, and we think that that's going to cost $80K to do that for our organization. Okay, we right now have a team of 2 people, and we think that they are going to spend about 1,000 hours. 2 people that we're paying $70K all in, fully loaded cost. Again, we want to incorporate not just their salary but also their benefits. Usually, benefits are about 25 to 33% of that base salary. So incorporate that when we're talking about fully loaded costs, because that's the full cost of the organization. Team of 2 people at $70K. We think it's going to cost them 1,000 hours. We have 1,000 employees with an average comp of $60,000. Our current voluntary turnover rate is 20%. And we have a historical voluntary turnover rate of 7%. So back in the day, back before COVID and Great Resignation, we had a voluntary turnover rate of 7%. It's now almost tripled, and it's up to 20%. So how do we use this fact pattern to create a compelling ROI case for our discussion with the board? So our team's time cost, remember, we said it was going to be 1,000 hours, and that's going to be divided by 2080. That's about how many hours if people work 40 hours a week, 40 times 52, 2080. 2080 times 2. We have 2 people times 2080. We think they're going to spend 1,000 hours total. So that's about 24%, about a quarter of the combined salaries for those 2 folks. So those 2 people, 140,000 of fully loaded salary cost times 24%. This is another $34,000. So we're going to be spending $80,000 on the campaign, plus we're going to have an implicit cost of another $34,000 allocating the salaries of the people that are on our team that are going to be dedicated to this program. Again, we want to create a compelling case when we're loading up that denominator with the fully loaded cost, so that the CFO doesn't say, well, what about the people that are going to be doing it? They cost something. That's not free. Okay. Here's the real needle mover, and this is something that nobody seems to want to talk about, but this is like the game changer. So there's a silent killer. There's 2 silent killers in every organization. One is the cost of turnover, and one is the cost of employee disengagement. Okay, so the average employee disengagement level across the world is something like 32%. So it's about a third. So all these organizations are paying out 100% of people's salary and benefits, and they're getting about 2/3. They're getting about 68, 69, 70% engagement level on average. And so you can look at your organization and you can say, well, is my organization average? You know, is everybody like highly engaged? Is it like a company like WD-40 where there's 94% employee engagement? Or is it kind of average? If it's kind of average, it's probably something like 70. So I'm just saying 100% of salaries paid out. The company is getting at best 70% of that value on average back from employees that are not fully engaged. Think about employee disengagement as the extent to which someone is pushing down on the gas pedal. The point is, people are pushing down on that about 70%. The other massive cost of that's a silent killer in our organizations is the cost of turnover. So Gallup and SHRM estimate that the cost of turnover is somewhere between like 50 and 200% of an employee's salary, depending on level. Okay, so depending on the level that they're at, that cost of turnover is some multiple of that salary. That doesn't, that's not specifically identified in the P&L, but it is implicitly hitting that profit number. It's implicitly hitting the EBITDA number. So if we can talk about making changes to our culture, change that are going to likely have an improvement on the level of employee engagement and likely going to help drive down our voluntary turnover rate closer, even a little bit closer to that historical level. Now we can help reframe the importance of having a culture of integrity, and we can tie our efforts to this thing that's affecting our entire workforce. So, you don't have to listen to me. You can read literally any study about generations and what's going on in our workforce. The stuff I'm talking about here and the stuff that we affect absolutely matters. And it's absolutely crushing the bottom lines of our organizations. And we're fools if we don't incorporate some of that in our talk tracks. Okay, my rant is almost over. I'll step off my soapbox for a second. And I'm hopping back on it. Okay, so our team cost, I've told you, is 34K. Our cost of turnover for our organization, voluntary turnover, we're saying it's 1,000 people times 20% times that $60,000 times 33%. So again, think about this principle of conservatism that we want to incorporate in our entire ROI discussion. The principle of conservatism says we want to be as conservative as possible. So if SHRM is saying it's 50 to 200%, which averages out to 150% or something like that, or 125%, we want to be way conservative. So we can quote that number and we can say, look, I looked at Gallup, I looked at SHRM. They're saying 100%, 150% of an employee's salary is the cost of turnover when you incorporate lost time, transfer of knowledge, J-curve time, recruiting, all that kind of stuff. For purposes of this analysis, I'm not going to assume 100%. I'm going to assume something way more conservative, like 33%. So now I'm framing out the cost of our turnover in terms of this more conservative turnover rate, okay? 33%. So our cost of turnover for this organization is 3.96. And we're saying if over the next year, if we can roll this out appropriately and we can hit retaliation head on, we think that we're not going to wave a magic wand and we're automatically going to be back at 7%. But we think with a credible program that we put actual effort into, we can affect that by 2%. Well, here's the new cost of turnover if the voluntary turnover rate is not 20%, but rather it's 18%. You can see that the difference there is about $400,000. So now we can look at that return of $400,000, which is probably way more than that because we're not even talking about employee engagement. We're not talking about some of these ancillary elements that still fall into that compliance 3.0 bucket. That pleasure-seeking, culture expansion bucket. But you can see just for this single component, we have an ROI of 3.5%. We think that we're going to generate a $400,000 return at least relative to the $114,000 that we're looking at. So I'm going to tell you what the CFO is going to look at here. His thought process is going to be like this $396,000. It's probably higher than that because they're not thinking about employee engagement, and a 2% change is not that big. Check. That's good for us. He's also going to look at this 114, and you're going to get credit for it being a fully loaded cost. But in his CFO mind, what he's actually going to think is like, okay, this is actually only 80K more cash that's going out. So this ROI is going to be even higher because he's like, we're going to be paying these two people that are spending a quarter of their time on this program. We're going to be paying them regardless. So this is like a smart way to play chess with your ROI discussions by anticipating the objections that are likely going to come and letting that CFO think in their own mind, okay, this is going to be higher than they're even presenting here. That's the kind of game that we're trying to play here. So we got to get these numbers right. And these numbers are always there because that distance between, again, think back to that Ethisphere World's Most Profitable Companies report. Every year, there's a distance between the world's most ethical companies and everybody else. That distance is driven by the ethics, the higher ethics of the organization, the more, the stronger culture of integrity. That distance, we have to be able to deconstruct that and take some credit for that. Otherwise, what's the point of that report? You know what I'm saying? What's the point of what we're doing? If we can't quantify it or we're not comfortable quantifying it and pulling that into the discussion, we're going to be leaving a bunch of persuasion on the table. So that's the other big message for today. Okay, here's a quick one on sanction screening. How we do? Oh, we're already overtime. My gosh. See, man, Tomel, I start going. And here we are. All right, I'm going to skip this one. If people are still here, I'm going to skip this one. I just want to show you another one in action. Let's just do this one at this point. People can see the replay. It's not that big of a deal. Okay, so I'll go fast. So this is right now a screening of 10,000 employees and vendors. It's all done in-house with no tool. It's done inconsistently. We have two people that are spending half of their time on sanction screening. Our odds of getting an audit is going to be 1 in 5. In our previous experience, we've seen 1 in 5 years we get an audit, and our odds of passing, given how inconsistent in the fact that we don't have a good audit trail, our odds of passing are only 10%. Our new solution is going to cost 20K. So, oops, what does that end up looking like? So our current team, we have two people spending half of their time. So that's $60,000 of costs being attributed to the sanction screening process. We think in the future, once we have this tool that automates it, these guys are only going to have to spend about 5% of their time. So that drops it down to $6,000. Our status quo expected cost of a fine is about $23,000. We know the average fine is $130K. We have a 90% chance of not passing, and we have a 20% chance of getting audited. So 20% chance of getting audited times 90% times this 130K. This is a expected cost of fine per year. So our return is the change in the time spent, the 60,000 less the 6,000, right? That's part of our return, plus our cost of fine. So that's 77,000. Our investment is 20,000. Okay, so we think our cost of a fine is going to be reduced, and our the time that our employees are spending on this process is also going to be reduced. So now you can see a 3.87x return, and this is a mix of both an efficiency return and a risk return. So we got a 1.0 and a 2.0 in this example. If you guys are fine, what do you think, Tomel? Should I just do a couple more, or you want to wrap it up?
It's up to you.
I'm on a roll here, man. I say we keep going.
Finish the last case. Finish the last case. Let's do it.
All right. So this one is this is on conflicts of interest. So you can see the math, what we're going to here, but the fact pattern is we have 5,000 employees. We have currently one person spends about a quarter of the year on the disclosure project. That person is making 60K fully loaded. 60% of responses to internally generated form are high risk in the risk assessment. We've had two 250K COI fines in the last 10 years. Our new tool costs 10K. So our current team, we're spending about $15,000 of fully loaded cost dedicated to the conflicts of interest program. That's super manual with no tool. We think the time spent is going to drop down to 5%. So our team member time return is going to be $12,000 because that 25 is going to be dropping down to 5. Okay. The annual COI fine cost is we've had two of these $250,000 fines over the last 10 years. So on average, we're spending about 50K per year that we think we're going to be able to improve that by 50%. Okay. So our fine exposure, right? We said on average, we're spending 50K per year on our fines, right? 2 over the last 10 years. And we think that we're going to be able to improve the odds of that, our odds of hitting a fine. Again, we're not going to wave a magic wand and like eliminate all the risk, but we can put something in place that's going to help us substantially reduce that risk. Great. Let's quantify that to our ROI equation. So our fine exposure return is $25,000. So what's our return? We have a $12,000 return up here for the reduction of our team members' time being spent on it, the repurposing of another quarter head for our team, plus the fine exposure return of $25,000. So that's a total of $37,000 of return with an investment of 10K. 37 divided by 10, that's another 3.7x return. So again, anything over 3, you should be super thrilled with. Anything over 1 for a quote unquote cost center, you should be super confident in, right? Because what you're doing is also going to be affecting the the price per square foot of the organization as well. So along with your ROI, this is like another great hack. Along with your ROI, when you're constructing the actual numbers, you should also have another section of like unquantified returns and list out a couple of those other things. Multiple expansion due to professionalizing our business, improved employee engagement, which I haven't even quantified. What are those other things that you can think about that you don't even have to quantify, that you can put in and make your case a little bit more persuasive? All right. Well, this last thing, I just want to show you a quick retaliation analysis because these are really powerful. And I just wanted to illustrate one more thing about like a sensitivity analysis. So this is for a massive organization with $540 billion of revenue over the last 12 months with 1.4 million employees. They have a turnover rate of 17%. 68% per SHRM are leaving due to values and culture. We know that there's a massive retaliation problem in most all organizations. And so this is to say, okay, how many, and this is the cost of their turnover, okay? 17% turnover rate, assuming this, this more conservative 50% cost, again, SHRM says it's 145%, Gallup says it's 125%. For purposes of this, we're just going to assume a 50% cost. That generates $8.2 billion of cost of turnover within their organization, okay? So let's look at a little sensitivity analysis where this is a very powerful tool when you're talking about ROI to show like, hey, here, if we change our turnover by 2%, this is how much benefit we would have. If you think that 2% is too high, let's cut that in half. If we change it by 1%, we're still talking about 80 million. If you think that's too high, let's cut that in half again. We can cut that in half again. But if you can show on a little table what I think a 2% change is pretty reasonable. 2% is not like, that's not cutting the entire turnover rate in half. That's a pretty nominal change relative to a voluntary turnover rate that's close to 20%. But presenting something like this that shows the sensitivity of it allows that CFO or allows that adversary to very quickly see, A, this is super conservative, and then B, if this is higher, I have the answer right there of how much higher this ROI is going to be. So I apologize that we went so deep and went a little bit over. Thank you for all of you guys that have stayed. Tomel, thank you for guiding us through this. And, thanks for this collaboration. This was absolutely a lot of fun.
Nick, thank you so much, man. What's so beautiful is that nobody is talking about this in the terms that you are talking about it. And it's so critical for folks in compliance to really begin speaking the language of management, adding yet another tool in our tool belt to continue the good work that we do in the companies. And every time you talk about this, it gets more enlightening. So appreciate it. It's been fantastic.
Yeah, thanks for doing this again. You don't need a PhD in mathematics to do this. You just need a focus on the other person, and it's always so easy to find this. And Tomel, you just said like we have to put these tools in our toolbox. I think that's exactly right. We're trying to build a program. We're trying to build a culture of integrity that takes tools, and this is a tool that's very easy to pick up and start swinging around. We just need a little bit of confidence for it. So if nothing else, you just have to remember the work that you do absolutely matters. It matters not just because it makes us feel good. It matters because employees want to work at a place that they're proud of, a place where they believe the values that are on the wall are actually being lived out. And once that happens, there's so much magic that comes from that. There's more psychological safety. People are more willing to speak up. It's easier for you to crowdsource risk intelligence at scale. And oh, by the way, the bottom line of the organization expands, and your organization will outperform its competitors. But it's going to start with you. Like, you actually hold the keys to the thing that's going to actually, be that secret fuel that nobody else can get. But it's on you to turn those light bulbs on at the top, because otherwise you're just going to be viewed like everyone else is viewed, as a cost center, as a gotta have it, as a bumper sticker on the car, when we're actually when we can really be a super fuel for the car. So again, thank you guys for staying. Hope to see you next week when we talk about hacking. Tomel, you're the man. So glad to see you, buddy. Thank you for the Miyaka folks, and we will see you next week.
Thank you so much. Take care. Bye-bye.